the definition of terrorism is like instilling fear, right? It's a word that really helps both sides.
Right.
Whaling is kind of a fading issue. It's kind of a dead issue now, but they're starting to draw on it because it's a very Japanese issue. I mean, both sides are heavily biased and both sides are profiting off their biases.
Right.
Japan is an easy country to bash, unfortunately. They just have a weak stand, they always have for some reason. And so for activists, it's a very easy target.
Diogwit, welcome to Tokyo Outpost. I'm joined in the studio today by Jay Alabaster. He's a journalist and researcher focused on the media and cultural issues surrounding Japan's whaling industry. He's a former Associated Press correspondent. He spent roughly half of his life in Japan, and he even left his Tokyo posting to live in the small whaling town of Taiji as a neutral observer. After embedding himself in the community, he's gained the trust of the local whaling community, and he now offers a unique perspective that bridges local traditions with global perceptions of whaling. So, Jay, great to have you in the studio.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So, getting right into it, the first thing I wanted to ask you was about Japan's leaving the Whaling Commission in 2019. So since then, Japan has been engaging in commercial whaling in domestic waters. So from your perspective, how has that affected communities like Taiji and other whaling communities? Like, do you believe that there's a sustainable market now in Japan for whale meat, for example?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, when you say whaling in Japan, you've got to, it gets kind of in the weeds,
Right.
but you got to break it into three. There's basically three different kinds of whaling. When foreigners think of whaling, they often think of the giant boats. The protests kind of came around the things that were going on in the Antarctic.
Yeah,
They're called the factory boats. Yeah, they drag the whales
that's
up.
my image.
Yeah, that's factory, quote unquote, factory whaling,
Okay.
which is like a giant factory processing boat and a bunch of smaller catcher boats that sail out in a fleet. There's one fleet left in Japan.
Okay.
But aside from that, there's these small boats that they call them small type coastal whaling. They're little boats and they can't process the whales.
Okay.
They catch them and go back. There's only 5 of them left operating in Japan. They're community based. They're not like run by a giant corporation or anything.
Okay.
And then even smaller in Taiji are the like little fleets of boats that go out and catch. They call them dolphins, but they're small whales and dolphins. So that it's 3 different kind of separate, almost competing industries within Japan. People think of whaling, they get it all mixed up. But yeah. So I think these two, the local-based ones, there'll always be a market. It's very small-based. They're community caught, and all the communities that they operate out of usually have an old whaling tradition, and so there's plenty of demand there. But what the factory-based one is trying to do, Kyodo, it's called Kyodo Senpaku, is trying to do is have a national market for whale. And that's still up in the air, whether they need a lot. They just built a new boat. We covered it, the Konge Maru, a couple of years ago for, I think, it was 51 million, I can't remember, I have it. 51 million US, which is like 8 billion Japanese yen. So they have this giant debt now to cover. And the question is whether they can make enough. And their only income basically is whale meat. So I'm not sure about them as a going concern, but the 2 smaller ones I think will always be sustainable.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a national sort of market would not be feasible in your estimation?
On the scale that they require to support their operations. I mean, I think they're kind of doing okay. The other thing to consider is that when you catch a whale, it's just like a cow or something. There's really good cuts, like prime cuts. Okay. And then there's a lot of it that's not so prime. Right. So the good cuts are never going to have trouble selling. It's like grade A Kobe beef. You're always going to have needs for that. But the offal and the innards, there's like less of a market for that. So when you catch a giant, and now they're catching fin whales, which are massive. So yeah, they're going to have no issue selling the good stuff, but it's what are they going to do with the rest of it? Yeah. And is that enough to cover their operation?
Okay. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you as well about like groups like Sea Shepherd.
Sea Shepherd, yeah.
A lot of Japanese lawmakers have sort of labeled them as eco-terrorists for their sort of actions. They've been kind of aggressive and even dangerous in some cases. So how you see it? Do you sort of think that the term eco-terrorism is accurate, or?
I mean, the word terrorism is a really strong word.
Right.
And I love Japan. I've been here a long time. Japan, aside from, in my experience, the religious attack on the subway way back, has not really experienced a serious terrorist attack. So I think they would use that word maybe in a lighter sense than other countries might now. So to sum up, I wouldn't say that they're terrorists.
Okay.
And actually the label, invoking that label, and they did it for Greenpeace as well previously when Greenpeace was involved in the whaling activities. Invoking that label invokes all kinds of legal help and support from the media. It's a powerful word to use. So from the Japanese side, I can see why they choose to use that framing and that word.
Right.
But the thing to remember is that invoking that word also really helps the activists as well, because being labeled as a terrorist now, look what we've done. We've got Japan all upset. It's a word that really helps both sides.
Right.
But I don't know if it makes any progress on either side. And I don't think the definition of terrorism is like instilling fear, right?
Right.
Like, are people in Japan really afraid that Sea Shepherd's going to appear and invoke some kind of I think it's a bit of a stretch personally, but
okay. Well, putting that aside then for a minute, what do you think groups like Sea Shepherd, what do you think their actions have done in terms of conducive dialogue, say between activists and whalers?
Well, they're not a dialogue. Yeah, that's not their goal, and it's not what they do. Yeah, they've done more to separate the two sides than I think other groups. Yeah, but in a weird way, groups like Sea Shepherd keep the whaling movement alive in Japan. In the literature, there's like the anti-whaling campaign, and then there's people that aren't supposedly, like, they weren't initially for whaling, but they're against people being against whaling. So we call them anti-whalers.
Okay.
So it's kind of made this new movement of anti-whalers within Japan, who are like fine with whaling, just kind of fizzles it out on its own as a cultural relic. But when a foreigner comes in and attacks it, like, wait a second, this is our. And interestingly, like, you've covered a lot, you guys, but like Sanseito, this new movement of like Japan first politics, I've seen them kind of dipping into the whaling bin a little bit. Like, whaling is kind of a fading issue. It's kind of a dead issue now, but they're starting to draw on it because it's a very Japanese issue, and it's easy to draw it and say the foreigners are against it, but Japan first. Right. So you're seeing that issue being drawn again, and I think that's a direct result of groups like Sea Shepherd, a foreign groups attacking it so vehemently. That's still left over. Yeah. So,
right.
Yeah.
So Sea Shepherd's founder, Paul Watson, following a 2010 confrontation, I think it was, with Japanese whalers, he was on an Interpol red notice for years, and then he was detained in 2024, I think.
Yeah.
And then Denmark refused Japan's extradition request in 2024, and now that notice has been lifted. So what do you think that's done for Japan's sort of standing in the debate on whaling?
Yeah, that's a huge issue. I'm not as tapped into the political side of it, but I will say that, as you may know, Denmark has a territory called the Faroe Islands. It's an autonomous territory, and Faroe Islands also does dry fishing, much like Taiji and other places. They have a long history. And Sea Shepherd and Paul Watson, he's now been forced out of Sea Shepherd. He's in a new group. They've covered the Faroe Islands heavily.
Okay.
So the Faroe Islands are no supporters of Sea Shepherd and those kind of anti-whaling groups. So if Japan was ever going to have a chance to like get this guy and get him to Japan, this was it. The country that had got him was a country that was targeted by active whalers. So they had a big movement within the country to try to finally put this guy to justice, so to speak.
Okay.
But they couldn't do it. The power, the influence from other countries. For France, he's like a national hero in France.
Paul Watson. I get that, right.
So the kind of Japan basically lost. This was their big chance, I think. If they were going to get him, this was like the perfect, quote unquote, situation. But they weren't unable to do it. So I think if it wasn't going to happen, if it didn't happen then, it's probably not going to happen. I had the chance to meet him earlier this year and speak to him at length. And he's like one of a handful of activists in the world that anyone would know. Like 90% of people you ask in a first world country would know his name. So he's a super, celebrity.
Yeah.
So when you're tangling with him, you're tangling with like the kind of elite. There's only a handful of guys like or women, people that way. But so I don't know if Japan knew exactly what they were biting off when they kind of the international uproar.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think he's almost in political office. He's been elected to some kind of office in Paris now. So in other countries, he's a national hero, and he's on his third group. He's one of the original founders of Greenpeace, and he founded Sea Shepherd. Now he's on the Paul Watson Society. But he's like a rare echelon of activist. So tangling with a guy like that, you have to have your kind of ducks in order before you go, because there's going to be a huge backlash. And when I met him, he's 74, 75 now, but he's still like razor sharp. His memory is incredible. Like he's a very impressive. Whether you agree with his politics or his stance or not, he's a very impressive and highly tactical person, not to be messed with lightly, I would say.
Yeah. So as you said, like he's kind of, something of a national, like environmental hero in
International,
France.
I'd say, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. But you've observed that there tends to be quite a bit of bias in Western media, like the portrayal of Japan's whaling industry.
Yeah.
So do you see biases like on both sides of the argument, like whether in Japanese media as well as Western media, and what are those biases?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I respect Paul Watson as a media activist. I don't agree with his stamp viewpoints at all. I just respect him. He's a media genius, but what his stances are separate. But yeah, I mean, both sides are heavily biased, and both sides are profiting off their biases.
Right.
So I mean, Japan is an easy country to bash. Unfortunately, I'm a huge Japan fan. I've been here a long time, but they are very weak internationally. I mean, what you guys are doing is one of the only strong efforts to
Right.
put the Japan side out there, but they just have a weak stand. They always have for some reason, and so for activists, it's a very easy target. So the whaling issue is one, but also the whaling issue in Japan are like a really nice combination because they know they're not going to get. If you try that with a China or a much stronger country, that I think the slapback would be much stronger, especially if you send activists into China. Yeah, so I think they have profit about it, and they're very aware of the fact that Japan is an easy target. And on the other side, I think Japan, as I said, the anti-whaling, I think Japan has, at least the whaling industry, has profited off the fact of the image of these black-clad. The Sea Shepherd used to have these black outfits with the skull,
right? Yeah.
And that image was like very helpful to Taiji, and they could look what's happening, and NHK had many documentaries about them, and so it's kind of a weird thing where both sides kind of had this mutual beneficiary relationship for a little while. Now it's kind of faded out, but yeah, it hasn't been helpful.
All right.
It's been both sides have kind of done okay with it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. On the point of Taiji, actually, following that documentary in 2009, The Cove, you had hordes of international activists like descending on Taiji. There were just these like relentless protests for years. But from my understanding now is that there's just like a couple of stalwart protesters left lingering on now. Like, so what were the factors in that precipitous drop? Why are there so few now?
Yeah, that's another great question. So The Cove comes out, and The Cove was like a once in a generation event movie.
Right.
Like it was made had an almost unlimited budget. A very rich benefactor backed it. So they had this unlimited budget. They had all this top camera equipment. It came out. They weren't interested in sales. They didn't have to worry about selling it. So they just pushed it out, and it was edited by a really strong editor who made it like this like really shocking movie, and it kind of invented like the action like environmental genre. Now there's
because like even the title it sounds like a horror film. Like,
and that's totally intentional. The music and the dark, the way it was filmed, and the way it was edited and cut up, it was like this action, sneaky. The small town with the big secret was the motto, even though it's a national. Anyway, so that movie would just hit with this giant shockwave across. Internationally. It's still shown in high schools and colleges in the U.S. Like it's old now. It's a 15-year-old movie, but it's still presented in class. So the impact of that movie can't be understated. So that kind of set off this wave of activism.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you have to remember is that Facebook was at its kind of peak then. And Facebook, there's certain kinds of content that fit certain kinds of media.
Right.
And Facebook was perfect for the anti-whaling media. It was like a short blurb, some movies, easy to make groups. They were the feeds, so it spread easily through feeds. Like we know now that they purposely, like there's been leaks since where they purposely like move up in the algorithm the content that's kind of spicy and gets people excited. So it was just the perfect content. So luckily they didn't do it intentionally, but 2009 was like right when Facebook was hot. So they had this perfect media set up to spread it. So I think that was one of the reasons it got so big.
Okay.
But now you're 15 years out. There was the Corona. International activists were coming pretty actively to Taiji until the Corona period, when people couldn't travel. That's one thing. And so during that time, foreign activists couldn't get in because no one could move. So this kind of Japanese activists kind of took up the mantle, but they haven't been as kind of motivated. It was a few years and they kind of faded out. And then Sea Shepherd, because it was labeled as a terrorist organization, once you're known as Sea Shepherd, you can't get in the country again.
Okay.
So the combination of Japan's immigration policies and the Corona, and also the social media shift to more fun TikTok type videos, which aren't as well suited to activist campaigns of that nature. I think those three were kind of damped down the activism. And also, it's the same story. Like nothing has much changed. So we can't just keep pumping out the same material as an activist group and hope that supporters keep.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Okay. So following that in Taiji now, understandably, Taiji natives, like, you know, since the documentary, they're understandably quite wary of foreigners coming into the town. So how did you find sort of adapting to life in Taiji, and what did you do to build relations with people, you know, at the grassroots level, like within the community, because you've become accepted into the community now?
By some, yeah. 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 When I went, now it's much more chill and relaxed, and I think people could wander in. And there's a lot of people that, because it has such a long whaling history and a long immigration history, there's a lot of people that actually speak English, and it's a much more open-minded town than you would think. When you wander in, it looks like a little Japanese fishing village, but it actually has quite an international heritage. So if you're calm and talk to people, there's actually a lot of people have relatives in the U.S. and so. It's more open-minded than it appears, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. But when I first went there, it was at the height of the whole thing. Yeah. So no one would talk to me, and there's a movie about it. But I wore this ridiculous yellow. People couldn't tell foreigners apart. Like all activists, everyone looked like an activist. So I wore this like really ugly yellow hat, and so everyone could tell who I was from far apart. And I drank a ton of whiskey with the fishermen, and just did. Yeah, we could anyway.
Whiskey helps.
Yeah. So it just took time, and people them finally understanding that I was not there to criticize. And I'm still not to say I'm in with the town. There's still people that are still suspicious after whatever 8 or 10 years. So, but yeah, I have a good base there, and I like it there. I have a house near there, so yeah, just a nice place to be. I bring students there now, like foreign students groups, and it's not an issue. So, yeah.
So you've talked about trying to end this antipathy and this hatred and aggression between the two sides, between whalers and activists. Do you see any sort of path towards mutual understanding? Like, what would need to happen for the two sides to really come together and have like some sort of productive dialogue?
Yeah, I think remember the question. That's a good question and an excellent point. But the thing to remember is the fishermen are doing what they've always done. They're just living their lives, and they're for profit. They have small businessmen basically. They all own their little boats, and so they're going to keep going as long as it's profitable. That's what they do. Whereas the activists are looking for hot topics. They want to. The kind of activists we're talking about aren't direct. I mean, Sea Shepherd paints itself as a direct action, but they're more of a media group. They want to get hot topics and blast them across social media. So you're talking about like a media group versus a bunch of fishermen living their lives. So there isn't really a place for them to. These are like salesmen basically. Versus like fishermen that are just going. So there's not a real middle ground. In the beginning, when I was there, I was naive and I thought, oh, if we got them all at the same table, and But now I know that they're just even if they're both Japanese and live in the same town, they have a totally different approach to life. These are trying to sell you something and create ideas in the world, which is important. And these guys are just trying to catch fish and make a living, or whales or whatever, and make a living. So they just come from totally different universes. The people I met a lot of the activists. I've interviewed dozens of them. They're often, they travel a lot, they roam a lot. They're kind of travelers and free thinkers and free spirits. Whereas fishermen, they're like fourth generation, fifth generation. They got their boat from their father. They're living in the same house that they grew up in, third generation. So just their viewpoints on the world are like totally different. So even if they spoke the same language, and even if they were like both American or both Japanese, I think they have just a different worldview. I think they're both important. I think to cite, but getting them to see eye to eye is a pretty big stretch, I would say.
Yeah. So, if that's the case, then where do you see things going from here? Like, is there going to be like any end to it, or?
I mean, the fishermen are going to keep fishing until it's not profitable. Like they're for profit guys, and they're going to keep going. And the activists, if it ever is valuable to them, they'll come back and it'll spike again. But I think basically it's kind of just gone back to where it was 40 years ago. The fishermen doing this for hundreds of years. They've been hunting dolphins in this way since the 60s, but there's records of them hunting dolphins and whales since, the Edo, since the 1600s or whatever. So they've kind of gone back to what they've always done. And, the water, to me, it's like the waves keep washing, time keeps going. And if there's some hot topic, because Taiji already has a kind of a brand, you could see the activists jumping on it if something happened. But I don't see, in the meantime, it seems like it's nice and quiet fade into, back to the way things were, have always been. Yeah. And when I first got there, I was very hot and like making a change and like.
You were right in the middle. At its peak.
But now it's just kind of a calm, quiet place, and they just kind of wrote it out as they read out a lot of other things. Yeah. Their biggest issue is the population issue. That's across. When I got there was 3,300 people, and now there's 2,700, and 40% of them are older. So the town, has other issues besides activists, as most towns in Japan do. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks for coming to the studio and talking with us today.
Yeah, thanks for the coffee. I appreciate it.
So this is Tokyo Outpost with Jay Alabaster. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.